Hey, listeners. I just wanted to hop on really quick before we get the actual episode started and say, I realize that my internet has not been great. For the last several episodes, I've been trying to troubleshoot this with Spectrum in the last several weeks, and so I think we finally got it figured out. Of course, this episode and the next one are still not great. So I've done my best to kind of edit around the issues wherever I could find them, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for your patience, and I hope you enjoyed the show nonetheless. During 3 days that saw June turn to July, my good friend and collaborator, Michael Kelly, and I had the joy of working with director-choreographer Seán Curran on an exploratory workshop of our piece, The Siren of the Drunken Boat. Siren is a cross-genre operatic cycle about poet Paul Verlaine's love for his wife Mathilde Mottet and his desire for poet Arthur Rimbaud, presented with piano quintet and fully staged with dancers. Seán brought together a group of 5 dancers to begin envisioning what it might look like to embody this story through staging and movement. It was an exhilarating process for us, and we left the workshop feeling really excited about the next steps for this project. I was absolutely dumbfounded by how extraordinary each of the dancers were. Not only was their talent breathtaking, they had an unflappable willingness to improvise movement, to freely explore and problem solve, all with an awareness, but seemingly without judgment, of the process. Here's a little peek into our invited rehearsal. If you're listening to this episode, I want to encourage you to hop on over to YouTube to watch what I'm about to share. Alternatively, you can find a brief workshop teaser in the show notes for this episode.
I'm Michael Kelly.
Hi, my name is David Cisco.
Hello, my name is Seán Curran.
I am the poet librettist, but I'm also one of the singers, performers.
And I'm the composer.
And I am the director and choreographer for The Siren of the Drunken Boat. I will be showing you today sketches. It's been very satisfying for me, this short little workshop, to just think about the possibilities.
I should add that Seán and the dancers staged and choreographed 3 numbers with only 8 hours of rehearsal. It was remarkable. Michael and I remain incredibly grateful for such a fruitful workshop. Seeing these beautiful artists dance to my music was revelation enough. And yet I also started to wonder about what kind of training the dancers received in order to be so fearless and collaborative in their work. What's similar to the way we train singers, and what's different? Hi, my name is David Cisco. My pronouns are he, him, and you are incredibly welcome to my podcast, Wholehearted Voice Pedagogy. This podcast is dedicated, as you know, to the art and practice of teaching singers. It is an extension of my book of the same title, which was published last year by Routledge Press, and it's available on Routledge.com, Amazon, and anywhere you get your books. Today I'm going to be talking to director-choreographer Seán Curran about what singers can learn from how dancers train. Let's dive into the conversation. It is my pleasure to welcome Seán Curran to the podcast. Seán's career as a performer, choreographer, and director spans 40 years, beginning with traditional Irish step dancing as a child in Boston. Curran is known for his early performance work with Bill T. Jones' Arnie Zane Dance Company, receiving the Bessie Award for his role in Secret Pastures, and as an original New York City cast member of Stomp. His 30 works for Seán Curran Company are characterized by collaborations across artistic genres. Founded in 1997, the company has toured to nearly 100 venues in the United States, Europe, and Asia. A sought-after choreographer and director for opera and theater, Curran's staging of The Pirates of Penzance has been produced at Atlanta Opera, Glimmerglass Opera, Cincinnati Opera, San Antonio Opera, and San Diego Opera, and with a new production at Seattle Opera in 2026. A graduate of NYU's Tisch School for the Arts, Curran now serves as an arts professor in the Department of Dance, which he also chaired from 2014 to 2023. He has over 35 years of teaching experience in modern technique, improvisation, body percussion, and composition as a visiting artist at the American Dance Festival, Harvard's Summer Dance Center, Bates Dance Festival, Boston's Conservatory of Music, and countless U.S. university dance departments and private studios. Seán, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
I'm so glad that you're here. You're one of my new favorite people in the world. Just love the work that we had a chance to do together. And just so you know, I've as part of the podcast, I've showed a little teaser of our work, just so people get a sense of what we were doing in July. But I wanted to kind of start our conversation by maybe just going back and forth and talking about what's maybe similar about how we train our artists, dancers versus singers, and what may be different.
Well, I think there's so many more differences than similarities. The similarities that we're at the same, goal to make these expressive, poetic artists that get audiences to feel and see themselves reflected and ask difficult questions, all those big ideas. But I'm working in opera quite a bit and I train dancers. And the big difference is, opera singers are dealing with a few little muscles here and dancers are dealing with a whole body of muscles. When I was a young dancer, I was in an opera at Houston Grand Opera by Sir Michael Tippett. And the dancers were astounded. Why do the singers need a day off in between shows? We can do 8 shows a week. But it's because of the fragility, I think, and the delicate nature of the muscles that and the voice that the singers are using. Singers, of course, are all about vocal projection. I train my dancers to think about physical projection. How do you hit the back of the theater with your body while you're singing with the joints of your body? I love that image for a dancer, that you're not just responding to the music, or as Jerome Robbins said, dancing in the music rather than to the music. You are the music. It's musical visualization. How do you sing with the joints of your body and have the audience see the music? The other two things that quickly come up is, of course, singers train one-on-one in a room with a pianist, maybe 3 people, a coach. Dancers train in groups of 20 or 25. And so it's a social kind of a training where you're watching each other dance, seeing how each other group of dancers solves the problem they're given. And I think that's a big difference. Dancers also train 5 mornings a week. Singers, maybe, I don't know, twice a week or something. It's not as intensive. Singers do a lot of work on their own, and dancers, of course, train every morning.
Yeah, and I'm sure dancers do work on their own, in terms of practicing, especially if obviously it's a solo piece, but so much of the work is collaborative, right? I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. And in contemporary dance, so much of what the dancer is doing is responding to prompts. Now, of course, there's ballet class where there's a set kind a set of exercises you do at the bar, and it's a familiar language. But in a choreography or a improvisation kind of a class, you're improvising, and I train my dancers to think first thought, best thought, which comes out of the beat poets. First thought, best thought. It's a way of turning off the inner critic and just going. How do you find flow? How do you approach a prompt like improvise, thinking about your body in space? Because, of course, dancers have a kinesphere. We're thinking always in terms of space all around us, near reach, medium reach, far reach. And then flip it. What does it feel like if you improvise your body is space? Because we have an inner space. You dance with your inner body as well as your outer body anatomy, but you're always aware of the space around you. And ing words, action words, falling, uh, suspending, uh, floating. All of these kind of descriptors are ways for dancers to find qualities, textures, ways of expressing emotion or ways of expressing feelings. And it's a more of an abstract kind of a way. We're not dealing with notes on a page and lyrics. It's about invention and play in the body. How does a shoulder move versus an elbow versus a wrist? How are shoulders and hips alike? Elbows and knees, wrists and ankles. I love that you said our bodies are instruments. They are, of course, but they're such different instruments, singers' instruments and dancers' instruments.
yeah, I would agree. Although I would say singers do use their entire body. That I know you weren't saying that they don't, but not in the same, obviously not in the same way, not in the same physical way. But we are calling on the whole body. And the other thing that came up as you were talking about the ing words, right? And that makes me think a lot of like action verbs that I talk to my coaching students about. Like, what are the action verbs that make this phrase texturally or different, or bring a different color? And yes, that has to do with the lyrics, or the character's action objective in the song, but a lot of that I think is also applicable. We're just applying it in different ways, right? Which is cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking about the training, the focus on the voice box or those muscles. You make me think that dancers and singers, when they're using their body, it's kind of an abstract visual language, I call it. You might call it a gestural thing. I'm often challenged to get singers to be in their body. And I say, be Edith Piaf, like tell the story with your hands. Punctuate the singing, the lyrics, the song, the voice with your body. And that can be in a similar way, like, is it slow motion as it is sometimes in contemporary opera? Is it brittle movement? What is it? What is the stylization that's going to underscore the words and the music and to get the point across, to get the story across, the emotion across? So yeah, I mean, I think it's so interesting. A violinist, shows up with their violin in the case and takes it out and tunes it, but we carry these instruments around with us no matter where we go. It's wonderful.
It's wonderful and it's humbling,
Yeah.
too. It makes me think too, and I often will have my singers dance, improvise movement when they're singing, just as a way of really engaging the entire body, of understanding what it is to take up space, and what it is to feel connected to themselves and to the earth, as they're singing, because it can so often be, here, right? So like getting the whole instrument online, is always key, and always brings with it so many more opportunities for expressivity. I'm wondering, how do you go about identifying a dancer's strengths? And what are the things that you're looking for, and how do you balance that with what they may be challenged by technically?
Well, I certainly say one of the most important things is just your physical presence. I think that's probably true for singers too. Twyla Tharp is famous for saying, she'd have an audition and she'd have the dancers wait in the lobby, and when they'd walk into the studio, she knew exactly which one she would hire just by the way they simply walked into the room. That's pretty intense. I need to see them dance. But I know what she means because
Yes.
there's kind of a physical confidence, there's a humility, there's an openness and a receptivity that you can read in a body. I teach at New York University and I get first year BFA students, 17, 18 years old. Some come from ballet conservatories, some were in commercial dance and did jazz, some did hip hop. We were trying to get them all on the same page in that first year. And so much of that is this physical expression. It's getting them to be willing to be silly and playful. So many of these students come from rigid, strict conservatories where there's a right and a wrong. And how do you scribble with your body? How are you more playful? How are you minimal? This range we need to train, because in today's dance world, it's you need to be fluent in so many different dance languages. In the early 80s, when I was a young dancer, you were a ballet dancer or a contemporary dancer, a Broadway dancer or a tap dancer. We were siloed.
You had
But
to
now,
lane, yeah.
yeah, you go to the hip hop audition on Monday and the ballet audition on Tuesday and whatever it is. And so stressing this kind of fluency to my students is very important. And this, you talk about technique. I'm fascinated by technique. What is it? It's a series of tools or tricks or concepts that get you to be able to do something that's very difficult consistently well. And that feeds into this notion of virtuosity. I'm always blown away by singers and what they can do with their voice. And what is virtuosity? The ability to take something that's very difficult to do and make it look easy. It's why we love the Olympics or the Rockettes or the New York City Ballet. I think we forget that as humans, we just love seeing other humans do these incredibly difficult things, whether it's singing Mozart or, doing a contemporary dance piece by Paul Taylor. It's just makes you feel more alive. And I think that idea of technique, that idea of virtuosity, is so important to training these young dancers, and in your case, singers.
Yeah. I'm wondering, do you find it, you're saying that, kind of getting everyone on the same page in that first year, do you find it more challenging for those who have kind of that really rigid training to find kind of their ability to play and improvise? Is that a harder transition, or is it harder for those who maybe have that flexibility, live into the rigor of something like a ballet style training, does it depend on the dancer?
It's a great question, and I never thought about it in the way you asked it. Certainly, we have kids, who start out with their hair in a bun and a rehearsal skirt and, pink leotard and ties. And at NYU, we don't have a dress code. You mean wear something that shows your body and no crazy political slogans or tie-dyed and paisley and stripes. And then we have kids who are a little more looser and, show up in what I would call ragamuffin chic, holes in the knees and all this kind of thing. And it's getting the conservatory kids to loosen up, to be outrageous, to be playful, and the other kids to sort of understand that discipline is freedom. Whether you're a hip hop, a ballet, a tap dancer, a hula dancer, I don't care. Ballet is our Latin. If you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer, you study Latin, whether it's old law or medical terms. In a way, for a dancer, ballet is a kind of Latin. We're trying to get them aligned. There's an interesting phenomenon now in dance training. We call it text neck. Everyone's heads are slightly forward, which affects your ability to turn, or what's called do a pirouette. You turn around an axis, you turn within a cylindrical column, yeah, and you turn in a shape. And now with the head slightly forward, the head is off the neck, so the spine is not on the back. And that's been a revelation, like that simple it's physics. That simple idea from physics, turning around an axis. I tell my dancers, it's like the globe, the world spinning on an axis. You need that. Anyway, just an interesting side note
We
there.
have that in singing though too, because as you can imagine, and I was doing some research for an article, and the difference of like how much the head actually weighs when it's here versus like it just is like it's like 40 pounds, 50 pounds. It's just amazing when it's not in proper alignment.
It's really a thing. I totally agree.
Yeah.
So yeah, that getting them on the same page is challenging, but very exciting. And at NYU in the dance program, we are certainly training them to be soloists, but also to be a member of the ensemble. Because in dance, there's the corps de ballet. If you're talking about ballet, if you're talking about contemporary dance, there may be primary focus, secondary focus. So you have to be able to be a soloist, take the stage, but you have to be a member of the ensemble too. You have to be able to finish each other's sentences kinesthetically and have this intense awareness, not just a peripheral awareness, but in dance we talk about backspace. And I always talk about the eyes in the back of your head, that old cliche. Feel who's behind you, what's behind you, beside you. This idea of space all the way around you. I mentioned earlier your kinesphere, like you need to have this kind of awareness. And of course, the kids come to us and it's all face the front unison. And I think TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, the young dance students now consume so much dance that way. And of course, that's on a rectangle that's about this big. And I'm worried about the stage, which is a much bigger rectangle. How do you fill that? That's where composition and choreography comes into play. And I teach composition to the first years, and every year, the first or second week, a student will say, "I don't know why have to take this choreography class. I'm a dancer. I'll never be a choreographer." And I explain, look, you'll make a more valuable, a more interesting, a more compelling dancer to a choreographer if you know choreographic processes, if you know basic compositional principles, because when choreography gets made, it's now more collaboration between choreographer and dancer. And in fact, in my own work, I would say choreographed by Seán Curran in collaboration with the dancers, because unlike maybe most musical situations, you're reading music, you're reading lyrics, you're interpreting someone else's ideas. A dancer needs to be able to solve these problems, turn this solo phrase into a duet. Can you run it backwards? Can you do it in a brittle kind of a way? Can you do it lying down on the floor? Can you do it on the moon, filled with salt water? Your skin is the texture of sandpaper and you're purple and pink. I don't know. It can get that outrageous,
Sure.
but that's a way of generating material and finding variations.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about, a lot of the music that singers do, especially I would say Western classical and musical theater, is composer driven, meaning that, as you said, they are interpreters. Now, there's still tremendous creativity and opportunity to bring their whole selves into that. But they are not, it's not artist driven in the way that dance is. I would argue that pop rock styles, anything that's contemporary commercial music, or like jazz, or things like that. That's artist driven, right? Where it's like, yes, there are some basic rules that we agree upon, but there's tremendous variety based on what I'm bringing to the party, right? And that's what strikes me about dance, is the need to develop the skills that allow for that amount of flexibility. Does that sound right?
Yeah, and I think it's something that's changing and evolving. I also think if you're dealing with a young choreographer, myself included, when I was young, I was a control freak. I made up all the movement, I made up all the partnering, I wanted complete and total authorship, I'll call it. I wasn't writing the music, I wasn't designing the lights, but anything that was happening on stage, that was my work. Of course, I'm older and wiser and much looser now. I'm interested in what dancers bring to the process and the table. You know, I made a dance a long time ago called Where I End and We Begin. And that was kind of a revelation that, together the collaboration will be stronger. I jokingly say we're a team, TEAM. Together, everyone achieves more. And this idea of collaborating is so important to me, and it makes it more interesting for me. I'm 65 now. I've been making dances a long time. I'm a little tired of what I do. I'm kind of not in a rut, but I have my things that I do. I'm more interested in seeing how one of my dancers will interpret it, take it, manipulate it, refashion it. So it's recognizable. There's theme and variation, within the work, but it's a fresh take. Because one thing that's different too in dance, in contemporary dance, is we're kind of reinventing it every 10 years. The whole notion of contemporary dance is that it changes, it evolves. We have this human body, the instrument we keep talking about, it's sort of restricted by certain laws of gravity or physics or whatever, but it's always in reinventing a new language. And I say to my students, you have to make up the new one for 10 years from now. How is it going to change? How is it going to evolve, and what's fresh and new? And it's really hard. It's hard to do
Yeah.
that. I know you do that as a composer too, dealing with, music that was written 100 years ago and then making companion pieces 100 years later, which is fascinating to me.
Are there other things that you notice that today's dancers are being challenged by, that are maybe different from 10 years ago?
Oh, so many things. I was chair of the NYU dance program at Tisch for 9 years, and I love the job. I'm a kind of fairly avuncular guy. I like to take people under my wings and nurture them, and I'm famous for taking people out for lunch if they're flunking anatomy or if they have 40 absences in ballet. What's going on? How do I push you forward? How do I lift you up? So, the kids are not all right. It's a cliche, old song or whatever, rock and roll idea. But I worry about them, in this world where they're bombarded constantly with all these idea of what perfection is. And I teach perfection is boring. It's impossible. It's the poetry is in the flaws and the mistakes, and mistakes are great teachers. I think identity is a big thing. I'm 65 years old. I'm a gay man. And when I was young and in my early 20s and coming out, I say there was only a L and a G and a B, and the L's and the G's didn't trust the B's. And I tell this story. I directed a production of Harvey Milk at Opera Theater of St. Louis, and a young writer was doing the preview, and she was a lesbian, but she didn't quite understand what I was saying, that the world has changed so rapidly and evolved so quickly. And now there's so many identities to take on and assume and feel and be authentic. And the other thing I think that's challenging is, this goes back to something I said earlier. We're forcing dancers sort of to make a decision about what's your path going to be. There were only a few forks in the road, I think, when I was younger. But now you want to be a backup dancer for Lady Gaga, or do you want to do the most experimental avant-garde downtown, dance in a loft for an audience of 10 people? What puts your life in flow? What makes you happy? When are you most expressive and communicative? And it's a heavy load. Our program at NYU is 3 years and 2 summers to get a BFA. Unusual. It usually takes 4 years to get a BFA, but dancers' careers are much shorter than singers. I mean, it's crazy to think, but a dancer's career might be ending when they're 40 or 45 or I don't know, 50. Dancers dance a lot longer than they used to because of sports medicine and cross training and somatics and all that kind of thing. But a singer is coming into their own, in opera anyway, maybe when they're in their 30s. And a dancer has already had a career of 10 or 15 years. So that's another big difference that I think is hard to understand, that a dancer's in a race with time and aging and gravity. And I remember the day I suddenly thought, oh my God, I'm not jumping. Like it seemed to happen overnight. Of course, it didn't. But there was a day when I thought, I can't get up anymore. It's devastating. A dancer has two deaths. The day you actually die and leave the planet, but also the day you realize that you can't do what you used to, and it may be time to get off the stage. So that's a big difference, I think, between dancers and singers. So singers, enjoy your long, illustrious careers.
One of the things I feel like and I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I feel like I see my singers coming in struggling with resilience. And I wonder if that resonates with you. Just with, resilience in terms of receiving feedback, resilience in terms of commitments to practice, sometimes resilience in the face of things that do not come easily.
Yeah, I identify with that. I don't want to be that old guy saying, back in my day, we were so tough. We danced on
Sure.
sprained ankles and broken feet. There's a little bit of truth to that. Like there was an idea that the show must go on and it will. And I still believe that. But I think now there's an idea in young performing artists that the show will go on. No, it doesn't have to. And that can be for many reasons. And it can be because you're injured and you're taking better care of yourself. Or, I had lunch with a dancer who was in my company, who's now a lawyer, who was stressing that, the show does not have to go on. That's an outdated idea. And he was talking about for political reasons or ideological reasons or what have you. It was a big discussion. But this kind of tenacity that I think you and I came up with came out of these teachers who pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. Some crossed the line, some went over the limit. I think my best teachers were great encouragers, and they would encourage you not only to find yourself and your way of being and doing, but to push through, to get up in the morning when, the last thing you want to do is go put your hand on a ballet bar at 9 a.m. and do tendus. The body learns through repetition. I think no matter if you're a singer or a dancer, and whether it's that ballet bar or 20 minutes of just scales, it's training, it's learning, it's finding a technique which you study and you learn about, and then you put away. And you only bring the technique back when you're not balancing for some reason, or you can't hit the high note you used to be able to hit a week ago. I don't know, a singer version of that. But yeah, I often want to say toughen up. I don't say it now. I'm a lot more careful, but and maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it's changed for the better, but it is definitely a different way of being in the world than when I was training. And I went to NYU. I went to the same university dance program I teach in now. And it was very different. We're still producing great elite dancers, as we call them. But the way you get there is a little bit different. We take better care of them, maybe. Maybe we baby them too much. I don't know what your young singers will make of that. But the only way out is through.
Yeah.
And you go through it, you work through it. whether it's pain or injury or a technical challenge. But yeah, you can tell your question resonates with me because I want to do the right thing, and
Yeah,
sometimes
sure.
I don't know.
One, and I think we're very similar, Sean, in that I always want to be, well, I always want my student to know I'm in their corner and that I'm there to support them. But I also am there to challenge them, and how do we spark their curiosity and their hunger, right? In ways that then motivate them to show up for themselves, right? Is something that I think about a lot. When I have students who are not practicing or not for whatever reason or not thriving in their work, it makes me pause now and think about how can I engage their curiosity and wonder in what they're doing.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, I don't know where to go with that, but
I think I look at a lot of solo dances that young choreographers have made, and I don't think they understand or realize that all artwork is biographical. And it's a self-portrait, or it seems silly to say, but in abstract contemporary dance, it's a journal entry. And I go back to this idea of authorship. Now, can have authorship if you're writing a song cycle like you do, a very beautiful one, or if you're choreographing a dance. But we're making ourselves, we're molding and fashioning this unique, authentic individual who has a voice, who has something to say, who's going to say it differently. In contemporary dance, we say we're speaking an old language in a new way with a contemporary accent. And that goes back to this idea of invention. So, how are you reinventing the game? How do take a piece of Handel and put your spin on it? I'm choreographing an opera at Santa Fe Opera now about a trans woman in the 1920s named Lily Alba, a real person, and the singer, who is a trans woman but is a baritone, has to do what she and I have called a kind of gender code switching, where she starts out as a man and then is playing with the idea of being a woman and goes back to being a man. So this is quite an acting challenge. And they're changing the world. They really are. And Tobias Picker, who's written the opera, is changing the world. The singer is Lucia Lucas. But then the tough guy in me wants to tell a quick story. I have an actor friend who, when he was a young actor, was auditioning for a play and thought he was perfect for the lead, was going to get the lead. Anyway, they posted the notice of the parts, what part you got back in the day. And he got a very small part. He did not get the lead. And he thought, well, I should sort of approach the director and get the director to know who I am. And in the conversation with the director, he said, well, I honestly, I thought I was perfect for the lead and I got this tiny part. But you know what they say, there's no small parts, only small actors. And the director, who was British, said, there are small parts, darling, and you got one. So I love that story because you need that toughness, that tenacity. You take that small part, you see what the actor who was cast in the principal role, what they do with it. Because maybe in 5 years or 10 years, you'll audition for another production of the same opera play and you'll get that part. So success is a journey, not a destination. I talk a lot to my students about process, not product. Do not be worried about opening night on the first day of rehearsal, darling. And for me, choreographically, students don't understand this, but the dance you set out to make is not the dance you wind up with. And we're singers, we're dancers. It's about live performance. If you want it the same way every time, make a movie. But understand, especially if you're in a Broadway show and it's 8 times a week, that Sunday matinee at 3 is going to be a completely different audience than the Saturday night crowd that has a drink in them. It's It's this way of navigating the world, of making sense of a chaotic universe where bad things happen to good people. And this is the toughness, this is the tenacity, this is the perseverance we're touching on. So for your young listeners, I hope it gets through. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, but really show up and show out, as the kids say.
As I said at the beginning of the episode, I was just, I could cry. I was so dumbfounded by the dancers in our workshop, and so grateful to them, Michael and I, not only for their talent, but just their openness and ability to improvise. One of the things you had them do was lie on the floor and just listen to the music, take it in, and then you would pair them up and say, "Are you two improvise movement together based on what you're hearing in this, and then you two, okay, now you switch partners, and then you built the vocabulary from there and said, oh, I like that, but now extend the arm." And so what you were saying earlier in terms of like choreographed by Seán Curran in collaboration with, right, was very much what I saw. It's not that singers don't have that flexibility, but it's something that there's a secret sauce there that I think we can absolutely learn from.
Wow, another great question. I think the secret sauce goes back to this idea of fluency. A dancer will do an hour and a half ballet class, then an hour and a half contemporary class, and then we give them a little time to eat lunch, and I hope they eat lunch. And then there's improvisation and composition and choreography. We train our dancers in music. Some come to us having played instruments or able to read music because they were in chorus, whatever. But musicality is a big part of that. But I think we instill this idea of you will be a collaborator when you are a professional dancer. And what is collaborating? It's learning how to let each other lead. And in the case of our workshop, I have to like sit down and give them a prompt and say, go off and do something, make a duet out of this phrase we just improvised, and trust them and let them do it. Now, it's not a democracy. I'm the boss, right? I make all the decisions in the end, but you'll get more fabric, more material. I'm often jealous of composers and writers who get up in the morning and have their coffee and sit at the piano and by themselves write out the notes or whatever. I need to be in a room with 5 or 6 or 8 or 14 dancers to do what I do. I can't, it's not a solitary thing. Now, I think there's a loneliness to maybe what writers and composers do. You're making
Facts.
it on your own. That's
Yes.
not good. But even here at Santa Fe Opera, where I have all this free time, and I thought, oh, if I only had 8 dancers, I'd take them into a studio and we'd make something. But your question is a good one because I think this idea of collaborating and process. So on that first day of rehearsal, you're not thinking about the finished painting. We're making sketches for the painting. And I don't know if it's true of you, but so much material I make or I generate is thrown away. I was a bit of a maximalist as a young choreographer, and the artist Robert Longo came to one of my rehearsals, and he's famous for Men in the Cities, these photorealistic drawings with pencils. And he said, Seán, the secret to a good picture is not what you do with a pencil, it's what you do with the eraser. So you have to be a good editor. I think if you're a composer or a choreographer, and to be a good director too, whether you're directing singers or dancers, oftentimes it's taking away. Where's the essence? What is the kernel of truth? How do you get right to that emotion at this point in the song? So I was very proud of the dancers. All but one were my students, and we have what I call a common language, and an ability, and I think this is true of singers too, an ability to listen to instinct, intuition, and impulse. Those are three different things. Now, related like distant cousins, but intuition, what does your intuition tell you? Impulse, that sudden gut fight or flight thing. An impulse, these intuitive things, the muses talking to you if you believe in such stuff. Um, and that's, I think, part of what makes a finished artist or gives somebody that authentic, unique quality that they'll bring to the work.
Yeah, I love the answer, and so fascinated by the regular training of composition and improvisation as part of that toolkit for the dancer. I think that's great, and I think there are things that are certainly analogous to that for singers, but not in the same, I think, consistent way. I think that information comes to a singer through, scene analysis and song analysis, things like that. But it's not. It perhaps is not as potent as a class that's dedicated to that part of their toolkit,
Yeah.
which is fascinating. In my work as a voice teacher and vocal coach, I've experienced performers who either tried to intellectualize their artistry or were afraid to make choices. And I'm sure this exists in dance as well. How do you help a student overcome those kinds of states to balance technique and artistry?
Hmm. Um, I talk a little bit about this idea of fear, false evidence appearing real, FEAR. It's like my team an acronym. Um, and of course, if you're being chased by a rabid dog down the street, you should be afraid and you should run like hell. But so much of what holds us back, I think, as performers, is this idea of fear of failure, fear of messing up, fear of making a mistake. And you just have to have this kind of brave, again, I'll say tenacity. When I was a young dancer and a young choreographer, I made a lot of solos. I had a great career. I danced with a big company. I spent 4 years in Stomp off Broadway, where I learned what it was like to be a musician. I'm not a musician, but boy, I got to feel like one, and that was a great feeling. But when I would do these solos, 10 minutes before the show, I'd feel like it sounds drastic. I said, I feel like a condemned man, like going into my execution. What am I doing? What am I trying to prove? And of course, you take that fear, that stage fright, that nervous energy, and you challenge it. I mean, you channeled it, I should say, and it becomes a kind of rocket fuel if you use it well. And, a minute into the solo, I would be in heaven. I would be in flow. The watchers were watching, the doer was doing, and there was this magic that happens in the theater where there's this communication, this transfer of energy, these ideas. Um, and so, I often say to a student, get out of your own way. Don't overthink it. It's just a dance or it's just a piece of choreography. And, over the course of your long and hopefully reflective careers, you'll have so many different experiences. You'll do the art songs and the Handel opera or the John Adams opera. Like everything is a chance to grow and learn and taste something different. And I talk a lot about like bugs with their antennae. Like as artists, we need our artistic antennae out in the world. Like I'm going to try a little of this, try a little bit that. And I think it's such a great image because bugs, I don't like bugs, but bugs do have this sense of getting information from the world around them. So awareness, open your eyes. Don't just look, but see. Don't just hear, but listen. And that's why I have the dancers lie on the floor and listen to the music. Now, if we had the time, I'd have them lie on the floor and listen to it. I'd have them close their eyes and listen to it. I'd have them walk around the room and listen to it because as Mr. Balanchine said, music is the floor of the dance. We're dancing on the music. I mentioned Jerome Robbins would say, don't dance to the music, dance in the music. There's a difference. And I'm a music-driven guy. I make dances because I love music so much. For so many years as a young dancer on the road, music was my best friend. I don't know if your kids remember Walkman or Discman. I took Joni Mitchell and Talking Heads and Leos Janicek piano pieces all over the world with me, and on the airplane, or in the loneliness after a performance in your hotel room by yourself. It was the music that sustained me. So we have to think we're doing that now for people, giving them an experience. And maybe if they hear your new song cycle, they run out and get your CD, because something in your work, your way of making sense of this chaotic universe where bad things happen to good people, the way you do it is a balm or comforting or soothing, or asks difficult questions. I hope that answered the question. I went off on a tangent, but I'm
Yeah, it
passionate
does.
about.
It does. Well, it makes me think of one of the things I often do when I see a student kind of going into that glazed over place, is we immediately start playing. I'm like, okay, sing this as a country song. Okay, now let's do it as a jazz ballad.
Oh, that's great.
Okay, now let's just completely, like, so very much kind of like improv, because once they get back into that play state, that's where they can find that flow you were talking about, right? And it's like I mean I was a total like person who I'd freeze. I'd go into total shutdown, because of my fear of performance. And it took me a really long time to realize that, wait, I love this and I have something to say. Like, why am I forgetting that I have something to say, right? I only need to be afraid if I don't have something to say, right? But there's something I want to communicate, right? And so I feel like getting my students to recognize, like, the reason you're doing this is because you have to say something with your life experience that nobody else has, right? And so let's say something, right? Let's say something through what you're going to sing.
Yeah. And surprise yourself.
Yeah,
That's where that intuition comes up. Ooh, I didn't know I had to say that, or I didn't know I felt that, or I didn't know I'd stuffed that down.
yeah,
Yeah, this gets into the whole healing process of what we do as makers and performers. And I don't want to get too, mamby-pamby out in the world crazy, but the work will save you. The work will help save you. I shouldn't say it will save you. We need to take care of ourselves in other ways. But this idea of transformation and change as an artist, the best works of art, there's some point where there's that transformation and change, whether it's the 11 o'clock number in a musical, or somebody dies in the opera, where all of a sudden everything changes and it answers a question, and you realize that no one gets out alive, or whatever it is. So this healing capacity that the work brings us, and this idea of being nourished by the work. I was very nourished the week we had together. New music, new songs, new people to research historically. So that's what I mean by the work will help save you.
yeah,
And of course, young performers want to show off and be famous and sign autographs and get Tony Awards or whatever it is. It's not what it's about. You learn over time. It's really about this idea of artistic journaling, or making self-portraits, or meeting somebody on stage, a fellow colleague, but also another character. Who's Juliet to your Romeo, and how do we tell that age-old story in a new way for, a contemporary audience? And the last thing I'll say just about that is that the audience showed up. They bought a ticket. They showed up. They could be at home watching HBO, but they're not. They're in the audience, and they want to hear your music, see how you sing it, and watch the dancers turn it into a dance of their joints and their body. And tickle the eyeball, I like to say, if you're a dancer, and if you're a singer, tickle the eardrum, you
Hmm.
know, because we're sensual beings. We look, we see, we smell, we taste. That's a life well lived. And there's bitter stuff and unpleasant stuff too, which we have to navigate. It can't be all ice cream for dessert. But but what a gift, what a pleasure. We get to do what we love. Most people don't.
Oh, ain't that the truth?
Yeah.
Yeah, great point. Well, I just want to end our conversation with a question about, you've choreographed some pieces with singers. Most notably, the one that you shared with Michael and I was your setting of the Liederkranz, which was extraordinary, so beautiful. And I'm just wondering what you've learned from singers as a dancer, choreographer, director.
Wow. You know, as a young choreographer and as a young teacher of choreography, I said no to lyrics. It's too much information. We're moving to beautiful music or interesting music. That's enough. And so often a young choreographer will come in with a pop song or their favorite Beatles song or even, an opera aria or whatever it is. And when I was a younger person, I thought that's too much. The dance should just exist on its own. But now I'm older and wiser, and I realize that not just that human voice, that humanity of this incredibly virtuosic trained soprano or bass baritone or whatever it is, that is another important ingredient in the recipe. The lyrics of, whoever the poet is or the lyricist is, another important part of the recipe. And of course, live music. I always want live music, can't always afford it. But, it's these human beings coming together with this incredible, strange alchemy that happen in time. I often wish I was a painter and I could hang a painting on my wall. I did not paint that painting. Or, throw a clay pot and fire it and glaze it and put it on the shelf, publish a novel, or even in your case, write a beautiful score. But dance is fleeting. It only happens while the dancers are doing the dance. So there's that to remember too. And in the case of this later crisis, it's only happening when the dancer's doing the dance. But Daniel McGrew, the fabulous tenor, is singing the beautiful art songs, and the pianist is playing the music. So I think the thing I've learned from singers is something of expression. And, I feel bad now. I talked about too little muscles. Of course, singers use their body, but the ability to express this emotion and fear and chaos and love and regret and longing, whatever these human things are, through a human voice in song is incredible to me. I made a dance to Ricky Ian Gordon's songs called Art Song Dance. He'd written some wonderful art songs to poems by American poets. And it taught me a lot about telling a story vividly and clearly, which, of course, in contemporary dance, we don't always do. It's not imitating scenes from life. It's not, telling a story like you'd see in a movie or a musical theater piece or an opera. It's more an abstract idea about making art. But singers, I think, are such incredible, vivid storytellers. They're not just telling you the story, they're singing the story. And that is, of course, where the magic is. So I've learned a lot from singers. As a young man, I wanted to be a musical theater performer, and I could sing. I was in concert choir in the Madrigal Society, but I did not have the kind of voice that would get me into a Broadway show. I learned early on. I learned the hard way. Now I'm a car singer and a shower singer. I love singing. I love having a rent-a-car because I sing to that radio. But singers have taught me so much. And as I've made more and more dances, I rely more and more on singers and lyricists and composers like yourself to make this whole big complete experience. So yeah, music is my life. I'm a choreographer, but like Patti LaBelle saying, music is my life, and I gotta keep on dancing. Most of your students might not know that song, but it's an important song to me.
I love that. Thank you so much for this time with you. I knew I would be filled and fulfilled by it, and I'm just really grateful for the opportunity to chat about our crafts.
Thank you. And I gotta say, I can't wait to get back in the studio with you and lie on the floor and listen to your music with our eyes closed and then get up and try to make the music visual. And I hope all your students get to see our collaboration because I think it's an important one.
Yeah, I agree. More soon.
Great. Thank
Thank
you
you, my
so
friend.
much.
I learned so much about the work I do with singers during our workshop with Sean, and I learned even more today. What were some of your key takeaways from today's episode? Sound off. You can email me at wholeheartedvoicepedagogy@gmail.com, or you can find me on the socials. My handle on most platforms is at Cisco Songs or at Wholehearted Voice Pedagogy. As always, I would really love to hear from you. I hope to see you next time. More soon. Take care of you.